How are you guys doing? Today is Tuesday, December 14th, 2021. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile on DK Metcalf. The elite starting wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks turns 24, and my intention with this episode is, of course, to put a good amount of focus on the stats and statistics, as well as the accolades and achievements that he's been able to achieve in his relatively short NFL career compared to the rest. Considering how tough it is to be an NFL wide receiver out of all of the various ways you can make it into the NFL, not only to make it into the NFL and make it on a roster, but establish yourself as one of the best in the entire league at that position is something you can do. And if you've seen DK Metcalf, you get a better understanding of what I'm saying. He stands at about 6'4", 235, and he's like incredibly strong, and all of the hype around him as a prospect was about how great of an athlete he is. But the fact that he was such a highly touted prospect was actually grounded in the fact that he actually could play the wide receiver position very well. He's incredibly explosive with his speed. He had to chase down Budda Baker for one of his tackles, and it's one of the craziest highlights you'll ever see, even though Russell Wilson threw an interception on that play. DK Metcalf is a very interesting combination of athleticism and know-how and potential, and I can't wait to see what kind of player he becomes. So I digress. Getting into the player that he was originally from Oxford, Mississippi. He would go and played high school football in Oxford, Mississippi. And of course, staying in the city, he would go on and go to college and play college football at Ole Miss for 3 seasons. His very first season came in 2016, which of course would go on to be Hugh Freeze's final season coaching at Ole Miss. And DK Metcalf would only play 2 games before he suffered a foot injury, which ended the season. He was granted a red shirt after that injury, but for the season itself, he had 2 receptions, and both of his receptions were touchdowns, as he had 13 total yards on the season. He would return for his redshirt freshman season in 2017, and in that season, he would go on to play 12 games in a season in which Ole Miss finished with a 6-6 record under Matt Luke's first season with the team. They wouldn't qualify for a bowl game necessarily. They wouldn't in any of the years that he was there, but in the 12 games that he played, he finished with 39 receptions for 646 yards and 7 touchdowns by the conclusion of the season. And then after that year, he would go back and come back for his junior season. In his junior season, he would play 7 games in a season in which Ole Miss finished with a 5-7 record. And in his final season, he would go on to and his season was ended with a neck injury against Arkansas. But following that injury, he would go on to declare for the 2019 NFL draft. And following the 7 games he played, or in the 7 games he played that season, he had 26 receptions for 569 yards, averaging 21 yards a reception, and he had 5 touchdowns. But following that short season, he only played 21 games in all of his collegiate career. Still, he was taken with the last pick of the second round of the 2019 NFL draft. And of course, just looking at context, this was the draft in which Kyler Murray was taken first overall out of Oklahoma after winning the Heisman Trophy the year before. Nick Bosa was taken 2. The defensive Josh Allen was taken with the 7th overall pick in this draft. And of course, it looks as though the first wide receiver that was actually taken in that draft was Marquise Hollywood Brown out of Oklahoma by the Baltimore Ravens. But DK Metcalf was taken at the bottom of the 2nd round. And other wide receivers taken ahead of him include Deebo Samuel, taken with the 36th overall pick from South Carolina to the 49ers. Also, A.J. Brown went from Ole Miss to the Tennessee Titans, his own teammate, and Mecole Hardman went from Georgia to Kansas City. Also, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside went from Stanford to Philly, and Paris Campbell went from Ohio State to Indianapolis. And 2 picks ahead of DK Metcalf, Andy Isabella went from UMass to Arizona. So just to give a sense of the players that were taken over him and what DK Metcalf has been able to do in that time. He was drafted by the Seattle Seahawks, and ever since then he's been a member of the team. He is currently in his 3rd season with the organization. His very first season was his age 22 season season in 2019. In his rookie season, he would start 15 of the 16 games he played for a Seattle Seahawks team that finished their season with an 11-5 record, finishing second in the NFC West. They would qualify for the playoffs that year. He would go on to finish with 58 receptions for 900 yards and 7 touchdowns in his rookie season. He also had 11 rushing yards, so he had 911 total yards from scrimmage. His only rushes in his NFL career also came that year as well. Following his rookie year, many people are starting to become more aware of the type of threat he could be, especially considering he had Russell Wilson as his quarterback. But once they went into the playoffs, the Seahawks would win the wild card matchup against the Eagles before losing by 5 in the divisional round to the Packers. And then for context, this is the year where the Niners made it out the NFC and they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 54. So this transitions into DK Metcalf's second full season with the Seattle Seahawks. And in his age 23 season in 2020, he would start all 16 of the games he played in a season that was that didn't have fans in the seats, but still allowed allowed every single team to play all 16 games. This season, the Seahawks ended up going 12-4 with one more win than their prior season. And this would be the second straight year that he would make it to the playoffs, the first time that he was a part of a team that won their division. But in this 2020 season, he would finish with 83 receptions for 1,303 yards and 10 touchdowns. To this date, all 3 of them are career highs. In 2020, he would be named a Pro Bowler in just his second year in the league at the wide receiver position, and he was named to the NFL second team All-Pro, meaning that if he wasn't the best or second best wide receiver, he was the third or fourth best wide receiver in the league in just his it's just his second full year of being a starter at the NFL level. Following that regular season, the Seahawks would lose in the wild card round immediately to the Rams. And for context, last year was when Russell Wilson won the Walter Payton Man of the Year, and the Rams would eventually go on and lose to the Packers, I believe, and then the Buccaneers ended up winning the NFC, and they ended up making it out. They ended up winning the Super Bowl. They won Super Bowl 55, which is the last completed NFL season to date. So that transitions us into his current age 24 season with the Seahawks, where he's posted over 700 yards and 7 touchdowns for a Seattle Seahawks team that at the moment is still trying to find their way in this organization. Right now, the Seattle Seahawks are sitting with a 5-8 record after a not so great start to the season. I don't want to say their playoff hopes are necessarily dead, but a betting man would bet that the Seahawks are not going to make it out this year. But still, that doesn't mean that DK Metcalf wasn't a very crucial part of this offense. And even though this year may be a year in which he misses the playoffs, the thing about DK Metcalf is he's incredibly young, he's incredibly athletic, and considering how well he's taking care of his body, I think he's going to last a very long time at this position. With that said, I want to thank the Pro Football Reference websites and College Football Reference websites as well. I want to thank the NFL and NCAA sites for giving me all the facts and figures that I needed as well. And with that said, I want to thank everyone for listening to all 8-9 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well once all of today's exhibitions and matchups are done. I plan, of course, on coming back tomorrow, which is Wednesday, December 15th. And until then, thanks for listening to my piece. Hope all is well and peace out. I'll catch you with another piece tomorrow.